Welcome back to another impactful episode of the PSTA podcast. It is your favorite host, your very stuffed host from my Super Bowl snacks last night, Patrick.
Yeah, no, I ate way too much. If egg prices go up this week, it's because of the damage I did to chicken wings. Sorry.
Wait. Eggs and chicken wings. What's the correlation?
Well, there's a whole lot less chickens to lay eggs after what I just got done with.
Wow, told you I was stuffed. My brain is not working correctly.
Food coma.
Food coma. So I had an analogy for the way that my Super Bowl snacks were prepared and also consumed. So preparation would be compared to the way the Eagles defense went after Mahomes from the preparation standpoint.
Okay.
Everybody in my house played their part. Sanaya did the Rotel dip, spicy sausage Rotel dip.
She did the job.
My wife did some buffalo wings.
Okay.
And her and Sanaya combined and did the sandwiches.
Okay.
And I did my dad's famous wings. It was
y'all had a
team
better
effort.
You had a better night than the Chiefs did.
Oh yeah, the Chiefs they struggled. Go fly Eagles fly, I guess.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah.
There you go.
But you did not join us today to hear us talk about Super Bowl. I hope your team won, or at least the team you were pulling for won. But we want to jump into what happened last week in the General Assembly, week 5.
It was week 4. The
Week
Legislative
4,
Alert Network email has the wrong thing at the top.
Yeah,
but it was week 4.
It's all good.
Yep.
So Educator Assistance Act, I want to start by saying, last week, our Anderson 1 Teacher Forum, they had their Legislative Hill Day. On the same day, the full House Education and Public Works Committee meeting met. And so talk about what happened with the Educator Assistance Act and kind of roll in kind of the role that the Teacher Forum kind of played with that.
Yeah, absolutely. So this is the one that our membership has asked about more than any other. H 3196, the Educator Assistance Act, is the 2.0 version of a bill from last General Assembly that would enhance educator working conditions. I got a subcommittee hearing in the House on Tuesday afternoon where PSTA offered testimony, answered questions from members, and really articulated how this bill, the Post and Courier wrote an editorial board piece on it this morning that is fantastic, because it perfectly encapsulates how this big, comprehensive piece of legislation that deals with like 8 different policy concepts really boils down to 2 words: professionalism and respect. And that was what PSTA focused on. We focused on how passage of this bill could enhance educator time, support, and respect, which are essential components of enhancing educator recruitment and retention. The subcommittee unanimously adopted it as amended, so there's some important changes that people need to be aware of so that they know what is different than last year. The bill made it to the full committee. That was so cool that the Anderson 1 Teacher Forum was there. It is a great snapshot of why it matters for educators to engage and to be active. If just inside baseball at the State House, in a full committee hearing, they don't take public comment.
Right.
There is no speaking unless you're a member of the committee. But they can unanimously agree to let someone talk, and at the suggestion of Representative Terry Alexander from Florence, they let Braden Wilson, our current South Carolina Teacher of the Year and member of the Anderson 1 Teacher Forum, get up and talk about the Educator Assistance Act, which was beyond powerful because about a third of that committee is brand new. Yeah. So they were not here last year to debate that bill, so they don't understand what a big deal it is to teachers. But they do now because the Anderson 1 Teacher Forum and Braden Wilson made them aware, and the committee members could not stop talking over each other to thank teachers and support teachers by the time Braden got done speaking. So it was an awesome picture of how educator voice can matter.
Yeah, Patrick, I watching it happen in real time was pretty powerful. And right before that happening, before the meeting got started, they allowed each member of the Teacher Forum to introduce themselves. And so I thought that was pretty amazing too. But then when they allowed Braden to come up and speak, and so if you want to see that, check out our social media pages and you'll be able to see that testimony from Braden.
Yeah, because Anderson 1's Teacher Forum was there, why?
For their Legislative Hill Day.
That was organized by?
PSTA staff.
Okay, just checking.
Yes,
okay.
yes, PSTA staff. Shout out to PSTA. So, Patrick, I like what you did there.
Yeah,
Appreciate that. Good job. And I think that testimony not only will carry for that meeting, it'll carry to the House floor.
Absolutely.
Which, last year it passed unanimously, which we expected it to pass probably again pretty unanimously, but it provided a base of education for those members that are brand new, like you said. And it signals to the Senate that this bill is coming once again, and also gives you some momentum as educators to reach out to your senators to encourage them to support this piece of legislation.
Yeah.
And really put your personal story into one of those many benefits of the bill.
Yeah.
You don't have to remember and memorize all 8, but find the one that you resonate the most with and contact the people that represent you in the Senate and let them know.
Yeah, and let's just absolutely tell your story, but let's talk about the amendments real quick so that people can advocate in alignment with what the bill does this year versus what it did last year or the year before. 4 big ones I'd put on the radar. 2 are new additions this year. Actually, now 3, because the amendment introduced in subcommittee has a new addition. So new addition 1 is a sick leave bank requirement for every district to provide one. Most districts do, but not all do. That is a huge support, especially those early career teachers who catch the flu and don't have enough sick days.
Yeah.
Now they don't have to take leave without pay because they can participate in the sick leave bank. Number 2, the bill this year addresses teacher assignment and reassignment in a way that the original Educator Assistance Act 2 years ago did not. And what it does is, number 1, it says that a district must assign a teacher to their school and teaching assignment at least 14 days prior to the first day of class. Current law requires that to be done by August 15th, which is kind of a worthless requirement because most schools start before August 15th now. The bill also says that if a teacher is reassigned to a new school mid-year, that the district must give the teacher 5 days advance notice in writing and get a majority vote of the local board to make that reassignment. Obviously districts need to ensure that every school is adequately staffed, so mid-year reassignments can be justifiable, but they need to be done in a way that gives the teacher sufficient time and support to make that transition and to support the kids on both sides of that transition as they're preparing for the new teacher coming in or the old teacher leaving. And then the third new thing that came up in subcommittee is the bill now creates what the language calls a lifetime certificate for a retired educator. So what that means is if I retire, then to maintain my certificate, all I have to do is every 5 years notify the department in writing, I want to maintain my certificate. I don't have to do any PD. There's no 120 hours of anything. It's just a notification, certificate is current. That's a big deal for retired educators if they decide they want to come back because it's one less thing for them to have to jump through and worry about. So those are new. There's also 2 important changes that I want to make sure people are really clear on. Number 1, the prior version of the bill gave educators a 10-day, for lack of a better term, free agency period where they could breach their contract at the date that a district posts the salary schedule, and that breach would come with no penalty. That language has been removed from the Educator Assistance Act. It's not there anymore. The reason why, as articulated in committee by committee staff, was because now that so many districts are starting in mid to early July, that 10-day window could actually fall during the start of the school year because the legislature can take into late June to finalize the state budget. Well, that was never the intent, to allow people to have quote-unquote free agency in mid-year.
Sure.
So the changing calendar has changed the implication of that policy. So in lieu of that, what they've added is a requirement that districts have to provide a projected minimum salary to teachers on their contract, and that projected minimum salary must be maintained unless there ends up being a shortfall in projected state revenues. Because even though the state doesn't finish the budget until June usually now, it's pretty clear by May what the top line funding figures are for education. And so what the Educator Assistance Act now says is that projected salary, for the first time, teachers will have a salary figure as part of their contract if this gets signed into law. That can only go down if the state doesn't deliver the funding that looks like is possible at the start of May.
Well, thank you for those 3 adjustments, Patrick. And if you want to see that in print, check out your Land Alert Network that went out last week.
I know there's a lot on this bill. Can I give you one more change?
Absolutely. Sure. That's why we're here.
Okay. The last change is the old version of the bill created permanent certification that once you're a professional educator, after year 3 usually is when someone goes on a professional certificate, that your certificate is permanent, no renewal. That language has been removed. There is no more permanent certificate in the bill, but it has been replaced with, this isn't the language of the bill, but this is how I interpret it and think it matters. No permanent certificate. Now you get automatic recertification. Because what the bill says is that a district must reward renewal credits for in-service PD activities completed by a teacher. And by state law, districts must provide at least 3 days of PD. The Educator Assistance Act actually bumps it to 4 out of the 190 contracted days. But even at 3, over a 5-year period, that's 120 hours. So if the bill says that every in-service PD activity must count toward renewal credits, if you teach for 5 years, your certificate's going to automatically be renewed because you met the 120-hour threshold.
Yeah, that's good.
So not permanent, but it eliminates that heartburn of trying to find the certificate from the thing you did 5 years ago, maybe in a prior district.
Yeah, that's a big one for teachers. I think whenever we're in front of teachers, whether it's a Hill Day or we're traveling to districts or schools, when we talk about that component of it, that's the one that gets the biggest head nods. And,
Absolutely.
And so we're happy about the movement, but we're not across the finish line yet. So still some work to be done, some more advocacy to happen. Let's transition over to the work experience credit bill over in the Senate. I think it's Senate 78.
Yeah, this one's a super simple update. It's the bill that would give you work experience for a related occupational experience on your teaching certificate, so you can get additional years of experience, additional steps if you've had prior occupational related experience to your teaching field. That is up in the full Senate Education Committee on Wednesday. We're recording this Monday, February 10th. It'll be discussed in Education Committee on Wednesday, February 12th. There's no indication that bill will not make it through committee and get reported to the full Senate, so it could be on the full Senate calendar as early as Thursday, eligible for debate as early as next Tuesday. So people that are interested in this bill, now is a good time to start reaching out to your member of the South Carolina Senate and encouraging them to vote yes on that bill, because it looks like they're going to get a chance to do so real soon.
Good deal. So be on the lookout for updates to 78. I think it's going to be debated fairly soon. So last thing I want to touch on, Patrick, is kind of we saw social media and just our teacher friends contacting me and also contacting you about the U.S. Department of Education and what the current administration is, their potential plans as it relates to the Department of Education. So kind of just talk through with our members what that means locally here for us in South Carolina, but also for things like the Disability Act and other things that we know the department does.
Yeah, so this has been a big topic in education circles, as it should be, because it's a significant deal. And full disclosure on this, I'm actually a federal government special government employee, which is the same category as Elon Musk, but we do not have any other similarities than that. Because
your paycheck similar?
No, it's not. But I'm a member of the National Assessment Governing Board. I was appointed by the first Trump administration and then appointed by the Biden administration, which basically just means no one likes me because I got appointed by both at this point. But I've kind of lived this because the National Assessment Governing Board is housed as an independent agency sort of within the U.S. Department of Education. And in the current climate in Washington is really unsettled. Not just for the education department, but for the federal workforce at large. There's a lot of uncertainty and instability. But in the education space specifically, there is a kind of, this is the calm before, I don't want to say the storm, but before things really accelerate. Currently, there is no U.S. Secretary of Education. President Trump has nominated Linda McMahon, his former small business administrator, director in his prior administration to be secretary. She is scheduled for a Senate confirmation interview before the Senate HELP Committee, the Health, Education, Labor, and Pension Committee, this coming week, at which point it would appear likely she's going to get a vote from the committee. She'll get a vote from the full Senate probably next week, and she'll be secretary. At that point, all the reporting indicates, and this is not insider knowledge from me, this is just all the reports out in public, is that President Trump has prepared an executive order that will do two things. Number one, it will direct Secretary McMahon, upon confirmation, assuming she's getting confirmed, to identify any non-statutorily authorized activities of the department and see what she can dissolve and enfold. So I give a concrete example of what that means is in 2015, 16, and 17, I worked for the department as a teaching ambassador fellow. That teaching ambassador fellowship program started under George W. Bush. It still exists today, but it is a discretionary program of the department. There is no law creating it. Mm-hmm. So President Trump's executive order would direct the secretary to look at a program like that and determine whether or not to continue it, with a preference toward discontinuing it, because the push of the administration is to downsize the federal government. The second thing that the executive order would do is direct the secretary to build a report of all statutorily required functions of the department, everything law requires, and make recommendations for where those programs could go if there was not a Department of Education. So what that means is it's an acknowledgement, if this is what's actually in the executive order, because again, this is what's being reported. Sure. I haven't seen it. Nobody's seen it. Right. But yep. If this came to pass, it is an acknowledgement that the executive cannot eliminate an agency. Only Congress can. But what the report would provide is a template for the president to be able to propose to Congress, eliminate the agency, and in the process reassign these legally required activities, support for students with disabilities, Title I for low-income families, Title II support for educators, assign all of those to different federal agencies so that the law can still be implemented, but it's implemented by somebody other than a U.S. Department of Education.
So for people out there that understood everything you just said, which you laid it out perfectly, you know, the U.S. Department of Education has been the vehicle for these statutory laws to be carried out. And so what you're saying is, if these things are codified and are in statute in the federal government, they have to continue, but the vehicle may change.
Yeah, and it's a lot of these federal programs predate the Department of Education. Yeah. The Federal Department of Education is not created until 1979 during the Carter administration, but like Title I is part of the original Elementary and Secondary Education Act under Lyndon Johnson in the 1960s. Mm-hmm. Similarly, IDEA for students with disabilities predates the department. So the theory behind the executive order would be, okay, these things are required by law, but the law doesn't necessarily mean there has to be a Department of Education. There could be other of the hundreds of other federal agencies. Maybe Title I could be under the Department of Labor. Maybe IDEA could be under Health and Human Services with their Office of Disability Services. But what's important to note is even that executive order and that report, there's still a lot that has to be done there. Eliminating an agency or in the way that the executive order would require, that has to go through Congress as an ordinary piece of legislation. And this is all kinds of schoolhouse rock, U.S. government teacher dorkiness, but ordinary legislation requires a 60-vote threshold in the U.S. Senate. Currently, the majority party, the Republicans, have 53 votes, and the Democrats have 47. So it would literally have to be bipartisan action to pass that kind of legislation. Is that possible? Sure. Is it easy in Washington right now? No, it hasn't been easy for decades in Washington to do something on a bipartisan basis. So there's a long way from here to there when it comes to potentially dissolving a U.S. Department of Education. But there's also a lot of things that the administration can do to fundamentally reconfigure the department that doesn't involve eliminating the department. So, I mean, that's the other thing people should keep an eye on is you can reassign tasks. You can reassign individual government employees depending on what their coding is in the government workforce. So there's less clarity than there is certainty at this moment. But what is certain is that this is going to be a longer process than simply with the stroke of a pen an agency dissolves.
Yeah, and I'm glad you broke it down the way you did, Patrick. And the truth of the matter is many of the services that the Department of Education funds is not partisan, right?
No.
It's, individual disabilities affect everyone.
That's
right?
right.
It's not assigned to a party. And so there's a process that has to happen. And so thank you for breaking that down. Before we get out of here today, anything else you want to share?
No, I feel like that this might be the dorkiest government podcast we've recorded yet. That's a strong statement, so I better stop.
Well, to give you an update on some other happenings with PSTA, Ed Camp Palmetto is happening on March 1st at Charleston Southern. I was happy to see all the dings and notifications on my phone over the weekend of people registering for that. Tomorrow we have session 3 of our Trauma-Informed Education Professional Learning Series with Columbia College. Looking forward to that. Still time for you to register for that. It's online. So check out our website for that. Starting at 4:30, ending at 5:30. And this week on the docket for Hill Days, tomorrow we have SCASL, our school librarian friends, coming up for their Legislative Hill Day tomorrow. And on Thursday we have Chesterfield Legislative Hill Day with their teacher forum. So we're looking forward to those two groups advocating for what they want and what they desire. And so it's been another impactful episode of the PSTA podcast. I'm Craig King, your host. We'll see you next time.